Hello there! I'm keeping the optimism all the show. I've decided that I'm going to be at 10 all show excited.
It's a super optimistic show, isn't it?
It's the last one.
Yeah.
The final
episode.
episode.
That's why you're optimistic.
Yeah. I don't have to do this anymore. I don't have to do cyber for you. This is exciting for me. The world is in the future now. Get out of the past. Well, welcome to the Brickin final episode. Very sad times. Ignore my optimism about it. I am going to miss talking absolute ruins with you. But I am Jed Salisbury, and I am joined by
Pete Connelly, field archaeologist, and
raconteur. He's added more. He's getting confident with his podcasting. At first it was Pete Connelly, archaeologist, and now it's raconteur. I'm not even going to pretend I know the meaning of the word.
Good band.
Good band, that's it, yeah. Steady as you go, that is all I know about raconteurs. Yeah. So welcome to Brickin, the final episode. So we had the I want to say live show, but I guess it wasn't really a live show, but the opening to the public.
Yeah, we did. We had a final opening to the public on Saturday, and so that's for those people in the future. That's Saturday, the 24th of September, 2022. So just put that down in time so that people, I'm hoping that people in 10 years' time, 50 years' time will be listening to this. So it just gives that moment of time. Anyway, that Saturday, and in our recent past, we had an amazing day. It was a final public event, inviting, people from all across Hull and the satellite towns and villages, anybody who was interested to come along. We were only open for 4.5 hours, and we had 1,020 people come and visit us across those 4.5 hours.
1,020 in 4 hours.
Yeah, it was astounding. At the start of the day, I was like, I'll be quite happy if we get this 400.
Yeah.
And when we knew we hadn't got 100 people in the first 20 minutes, it was like, we might get quite a lot of people coming today. And the families, people of all ages, just kept on coming, talking to the archaeologist. Goodwin Trust put on so much extra material as well. We had scrap stored down, we had a hurdy-gurdy and a dulcimer player down, capturing those medieval sounds and vibes. And it was
medieval bangers.
Yeah, those medieval bangers. The sort of things that Henry VIII might have we cut some shapes to back in the 1530s.
I can imagine Henry VIII being like, green sleeves, absolute tune.
Yeah, and if you didn't get it,
people are like, it is a tune, sir. You're alright. Let's make it number one for the next 100 years. I see it on the old song. No, green sleeves. Turns out, I mentioned it probably came out in the 80s. I wouldn't know.
No, I think it's appropriate to the period.
That's good to know. So it was a successful day. 1,000 odd people there. To put that in perspective, I tour around the country to sell out shows, so I usually get about 30 people to per gig. So I'm not good at maths, but I'm going to have to do a lot of shows to make 1,000 odd people, and you did it in 4 hours.
Yeah, we did it in 4 hours. But to be fair, I wasn't on my own. So,
right, a team.
There was a team.
Does help having a 500-year fort as the main attraction.
As the main attraction, having a unique, nationally protected monument to show to people. It really kind of gives you a sort of headline. And then having a great team of archaeologists and volunteers talking to the public, and then everything else that the Goodwin Trust brought along, just making it a great family-friendly event. Yeah, superb.
And obviously we've talked about how fascinating it is, but I mean, for you as an archaeologist and raconteur, it must be so nice to see that there is a huge thirst for this type of knowledge and this type of history in the city.
Yeah, it's amazing and mind-blowing in many ways, and I just a great positive feeling all around that we can give something to the people of Hull, and the people of Hull have a huge appetite to see their archaeology and their heritage, their history put on show and talked about and brought to life. It's funny, we often get told about, you don't want to live in the past, live in the now, or look to the future, but obviously, you've got to look to the past to understand where you're coming from. I think Putin's finding this problem at the moment. He's not studied enough of what happens in that area that is now modern Ukraine, to think about what sort of problems may arise if you go into war lightly.
And now he is suffering from his own hubris.
Yeah, he is. And I just look at the past, learn about where we are now, think to the future. It's all tied together. It's a big story.
I read something that Russia's Google search increased when he released a draft on how to break your arm. I wonder if this happened in Henry VIII times. People with a printing press and their fanzines was like, here's how you get out of a draft to break your arm.
The speed of technological information sharing probably meant that like people didn't quite get the heads up before people came knocking at the door. They said, well, they probably wouldn't be very polite about it. You'd just be sort of press ganged into a situation, and taken off the streets, press ganged into the Navy or whatever. But yeah, I don't think maybe there was a bit of like shoving pencils up nose and going whittle as a thing, but yeah, I don't think the heads up is quick.
Imagine you just casually live in your house and then end up in the army in a fort house in Hull. Just there you are at a blockhouse.
And then going back to your family a decade later and then going, you're really popping out for a tournament. Well, I popped out for that tournament. I was press ganged. I spent the last decade in Hull, garrisoned on a blockhouse. We were never attacked. I've smoked a lot of tobacco, and now I'm back.
Yeah, and he's returned at home at the ripe old age of 24, ready to retire.
Ripe old age 24, looking down quite literally the musket barrel of a gun, thinking I'll be dead by the time I'm 40.
There you go. He's like, I had my midlife crisis at 19. That's what I did.
Yeah, your little one's already at 10 years old and is out earning. It wouldn't have necessarily been the best life back then. No,
it wouldn't. But it's an interesting one to look back on for us at least.
Yeah.
Their pain is our knowledge and entertainment.
Yeah. And if there's one thing we've learned, referencing time traveling Jed, if you're going to go back in the past, make sure you're going back in the upper echelons of society where you've got a bit of money to afford things. Because if you are in that peasantry or that kind of, let's call it working classes, it's going to be a bit grim. And you're like, sometimes, if you're called up, it could be called up to possibly never return home.
I'll tell you this. There's a fascinating YouTube channel called Hull Historian.
Yeah.
I don't know if you've come across him.
I've looked at there's Hull Nerd.
Yeah.
Who does a lot of stuff.
So he's got a fascinating YouTube channel, and I was watching it while doing my support work, and he was on about the hidden villages of Skullcoats, and he was on about workhouses.
Yeah.
And he was like, some of these workhouses, were up to the 1880s, and then just kept referring to it as the 80s. But my support worker didn't pay attention to the first bit, and I can't believe this was what life was like in the 80s. I was just like, oh, bless. People listen to Prince while in the workhouse, just like, working away, slaving, getting squabble, and then you just got Prince.
Yeah, or like
Purple Rain, Purple Rain.
Or people squabbling about, who's better, Spandau Ballet or Duran Duran, while like sweating away and creating clothes for other people.
Yeah, well, getting beaten with a stick because they're not working out.
Yeah.
The 80s were a miserable time. You had Madonna.
But thank God for Dayglow.
Yeah. But the only thing that'll get me through this long day of the workhouse is knowing that I'm hungry, like the wolf.
That'll get me through the day.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, why not? But it's amazing, we joke, like archaeology in history is quite literally anything that happened before breakfast.
Right.
I'm nicking that from Hey Dougie, by the way, just so I can reference that. I've got 2 kids. We watch a lot of Hey Dougie, and there's an episode which is the history badge, and in it he explains that history is everything that has happened before breakfast today.
Right.
So, I'm going to claim as an archaeologist, anything archaeological, anything historical that's happened before your breakfast today is now archaeology to me.
Wow.
So we joke about the 80s, it could be the 1880s, the 1980s, or the 1580s, and there's archaeological interest in it.
It's all history.
Yeah, it's all fair game to me.
So you had this huge attraction, 1,000 people, 4 hours, which is super impressive, and it does again highlights the amount of passion there is for history right now. And I assume it's all the time, but like to be centered on this one South Blockhouse. So what other things in the whole area that they can sort of, because obviously sadly now the blockhouse will be getting covered up.
Yeah.
And then hopefully in future there'll be something there to commemorate the blockhouse, and you can receive more information. Listen to this podcast. Yeah. So What other parts of history of Hull can people explore then?
It all really, I mean, like this is going to come back to the fact I'm going to claim everything before your breakfast. Is the fact that you can wander around Hull city centre, and in that old town space, you can basically venture through 700 years of Hull's history, from the Minster to the medieval streets, the way that they wind away around that city centre area, stumbling upon the land of green ginger and thinking, wow, like, what's all this about? Why land of green ginger? Heads up, it's not a spoiler, but we don't know. And you can look at sort of Henry VIII's period style, sort of Tudor style buildings. We talked about the old grammar school beside the Minster last week. Bits of medieval, 18th century, Georgian, Victorian, Edwardian, and 20th century archaeology is all there. The fact that you can stand in the Queen's Gardens and think, right, so the Queen's Gardens only became a gardens in the 1930s. Before that, it was a dock that was built in the late 18th century. That dock's there because the city wall ditch ran through this space from the 1400s. The city was already founded by the monks of News Abbey, but bought by Edward I and turned into Kingston upon Hull. That's there because of the town and the city walls, and that's there because of the River Hull, that there was an earlier village of Wyke, and then that then takes you back into a pre-Norman conquest period. So we're getting back to the Vikings now. It's a really quick time travel, but you go up into the Yorkshire Wolds, or wander around other parts of East Yorkshire, Holderness and things like that. You'll start to get Viking place names and think about the Vikings and Saxons as well. So you get these at the end of the 5th century AD, you've got Saxons coming into the area and settling down. And that's because the Romans have left. And so you've got all this amazing Roman archaeology in the area as well. Out at Brough, along the west side of the Yorkshire Wolds, up into the Wolds itself, out into the Holderness region. The Romans were here, they were doing their things, a big military base up in York, which has a huge demand on the local landscape. You just have to go into the Hull and East Riding Museum and walk into the Roman galleries and look at the amazing Roman mosaics that come from our region to understand how rich this area was. The Roman mosaics in Hull and East Riding Museum are some of the best that you'll get in the country. Absolutely astounding. Now, I know this is turning into a bit of a monologue. I feel like I'm a criminal now monologuing before the superhero does me in. But I can keep going on. We can go back into the Iron Age. We're talking more than 2,000 years ago now, where people moved from northern France and then settled in north of the river, north of the Humber estuary, and you get these things called square barrows and chariot burials, and you've got this amazing population. And do you want to keep going back? Let's go into the Bronze Age and talk about the local Bronze Age burials. You've got amazing burial mounds up in the Wolds. Some others that have not survived so well, but we know where they are. You've got people using beaker-style pottery, that takes you back 2,500 BC. We're talking 4,500 years ago now. Go back into the Neolithic with the earliest farmers. The earliest farmers are in this landscape as well, doing their thing. And even before that, we're going to go back to the Mesolithic, where we've got hunters-gatherers. So in that kind of very short monologue, you've got everything from now all the way back sort of 8,000 years, taking us back into the past, on your doorstep.
That is a hell of a lot of history. That is way more history than I would have ever thought, ever ever.
Yeah. I'm sorry, you look aghast.
Yeah.
Maybe you're just aghast at the fact that I've just
I
talked without breath.
Yeah, I'm more impressed with the monologue of that. I think that is the show about I've been Salisbury. But the amount of history that just, I mean, it makes sense that history links to history, but just so much in our local area, and you can't, in fact, kind of flabbergasted because you don't think that far back of history. Yeah. Where human beings were wrapped up in our own time, where the past is the past, and certain places has a history, but you just went back centuries upon centuries, and we don't think like that. You know what I mean?
Yeah. It's a really weird thing in many ways, to be an archaeologist, because I often find myself talking about centuries as if they lasted 10 minutes.
Yeah.
When people talk about the Bronze Age, That's a period that lasts from about 2,500 BC to around about 850 BC. So, you're talking about 1,800 years. Now, when people say the Bronze Age, that's 1,800 years. That's a bit like taking us now back into the Roman period and somehow trying to make all of that the same period. So when you hear an archaeologist talking about the Neolithic or the Bronze Age, or even the Iron Age itself lasts for about 850 years. It's, we'll say, in the Iron Age, that's not 10 minutes. That's not like a 5-minute slice of time. That's centuries upon centuries upon centuries. And, show me age, I'm 50. And when I look back at what's happened over the last 50 years, the 50 years of my life, you think, gosh, 50 years is a long time. We had fanzines back in the past. And it's a bit, so when you start to deal with archaeology, how time compresses around you and how you talk about time and think about time becomes really, really odd.
Yeah, I mean, I'm 32 to show my age, and when you think about modern history and in hundreds of years, people will be discussing the time I grew up in as a changing point for the future. We had wars, rise of terrorism, the rise of the internet. We are really at the...
I'm surprised you didn't say rise of the robots there.
Rise of the robots. I mean, give it a couple of years. We are at very much a massive turning point of the next age in history, and we don't even realise it. We don't know what's going to be said about us in 100 years and how... the effects that we're seeing all around the world now.
That's a really good point, Jed. That 100 years, thinking even in 100-year slices. So we are sitting in Thornton Village Hall, in the middle of Thornton Estate, in Hull, and this area alone has changed so much in 100 years. This area used to be covered in tightly compact terrace housing, which all disappears after the Second World War as the area gets developed in a different way, sort of with low-rise and high-rise flats going in the 60s and new builds going through the 60s, 70s. So when you look at maps of this area and you come to think, wow, how much has changed? Where have all those streets disappeared? Streets have disappeared. Terraces upon terraces of houses have disappeared. And when you start to think, what's happened here in centuries? Unbelievable. This area used to, and we're talking a century ago, used to have a Jewish enclave. It was a big area for the Jewish population living in Hull. So, not far from here, you've got the Alexandra Hotel, a pub, beautiful glazed tile front to it. But you'll see the Star of David caught in one of the windows, and that's just that little reference to the Jewish population that used to live here. And there's an old Jewish cemetery. There are traces of, there was a synagogue in the area, but all that is dissipated. So there's traces. So it doesn't have to be thinking about thousands of years in the past and thinking about, those ancient Egyptians, weren't they so clever? And traipsing over to ancient Egypt and having a cruise on the Nile, hopefully without any death, or going to ancient Greece or Rome. There's stuff on your doorstep. And so the stuff in the Goodwin area is just as fascinating and interesting, and just below our feet. That's the other big thing.
I do love that little Easter eggs of history there, like the Jewish star.
Yeah.
It's just I like that history has little Easter eggs of, you walk around the marina or, the land of Green Ginger, this is the smallest window. Yeah. It's just little hints of hey, there's more of a story here.
Yeah.
Land of Green Ginger, I like the theory of why it's called that, though. You said we don't know why it's called that. Do you know the theory behind that?
No, I don't. Are you going to educate me?
Educate. Yeah, this is where you tell me I'm wrong. You're the smart man. But essentially, people would bring in spices and things from Europe, Europe, and because there was heavy taxation on that, they'd sneak them in on the underground tunnels in Land of Green Ginger and sell them there. So it was known as the Spice Den of Hull. So that's how it started to establish its name, because that's where you would go buy ginger from and stuff.
I like that as a story.
Yeah. This is why you're like, I don't think so.
I'm going to remain a bit of a skeptic.
Okay.
See, but that's the other thing, sort of in many ways, archaeologists, we can be a bit cynical and a bit skeptical. Little things tunnels in Hull. Tunnels in Hull aren't really a big thing. Because the flood. Now, don't get me wrong, there are some tunnels in Hull, and there's been a few publications and internet articles about them, and so we know there are some big sort of cavernous spaces, But if you were building a city beside a river such as Hull and the estuary such as Humber, which had a lot of tidal effect on mud, because let's face it, we're kind of sitting on a very clayey mud. Tunnels are not a great idea because they flood quite a lot, and if there's one thing I know about ginger, it doesn't like getting wet. So I'm not too sure.
Okay.
However, if you want to prove me wrong, I'm up for it.
Challenge accepted.
Yep, indeed. Din din din.
I guess I'll find out when I'm time traveling.
Yeah. If you could do that, that'd be absolutely.
I'll come back holding some ginger covered in clay mud, going, "Have I got a story for you, Pete? Have I got a story for you?"
Now, if we were in a Scottish context, ginger is a sort of a local colloquial for a bottle of iron brew.
Right.
So you can go out for a bottle of ginger and come back with a bottle of iron brew. Now, I don't know if you've ever tried iron brew.
I love iron brew.
Excellent, good man. So if you come back with your time travelling with a bottle of iron brew, that'd be even better evidence for the land of green ginger.
Right.
Maybe
green tasting iron brew.
Yeah.
That's the challenge accepted.
Excellent. But that land of green ginger, there's those, like you say, those little Easter eggs, those little stories, those little things that make you think about the past and then make you think about storytelling. So, we've got this land of green ginger. We might not know all of the facts around why it's called that, but you want to fill that space with stories, and I think that's part of it. So we're all fascinated by stories, and that's what archaeology and history and heritage does, is it tells a story. It tells us where we've come from, where we are now, why we're here, say, why is this building here, why it's in the shape that it is, why are the streets the way that they are in Thornton Village, and you just keep delving back and you keep filling those gaps, you keep telling those stories, you keep uncovering things, it is quite literally history in spades.
It is, there we go. That's the title of your autobiography.
Yeah, history in spades, yeah, it came to me in a flash the other day, and I think I'm going to use
a
this.
sequel to the Man Who's Lives in Ruins.
Yeah.
I like it.
I think that'd be my second album.
That's your second album. Yeah, that's very much your white album. No, yeah, I this is just little. I remember being a kid on Bev Road and seeing train tracks. Well, but then later found out they were tram tracks.
Yeah.
And I wouldn't have known that. And then this little stuff that you find out all over. And the more you look for history around Hull, the more you'll find it. And the more Hull is such a rich history, such a tapestry of history as well. And so, if you went to the Blockhouse and thought, I'd love to know more about Hull. There is so much to learn about Hull, and so much from each different time periods, and so many places you can go and learn about Hull.
Yeah, so I think a big shout out should be to Hull History Nerds.
Yeah.
Because his YouTube videos are superb, and he covers a lot of that railway history and sort of public transport history, as well as the bigger history of Hull. So that's a great way of finding out about.
Particularly shout out on his episode on Spain Point. That was fantastic.
Superb. Yeah.
That was fantastic.
It was very good.
Yeah,
very good. And sort of you come to realise about how richly textured Hull's past is, and specifically because it's also a maritime looking city. So we've touched upon bricks and brickmaking, the humble brick. Again, archaeologists can get a bit obsessed with the humble brick. It's not something that every day somebody's going to walk on the street and say, look at the brickwork on that. But you'll find with architects and archaeologists that the humble brick can tell 1,000 stories. And when we look at the earliest brick architecture in Hull, the remains of the city walls, the Minster, the Blockhouse, and say the old grammar school and things like that, you sort of comes to realise that Hull was at that cutting edge, but all that information was flowing over, and the skills from Northern Europe, and not far from here we've got the Danish church, and that's still that link to Scandinavia and Northern Europe is still there. The fact that the city is part of the Hansa, which the Hanseatic League were this big commercial trading force in the late medieval period. They had their own standing army. They were that big, they could boss cities and boss countries around because they held the keys to commerce. But in the last few decades, the Hansa has sort of regrouped as a sort of friendship group. Cities all, who are from the same sort of background, and grouping together, share knowledge, share the tourism and heritage information to try and make a sort of Hansa network. Now, Hull is part of that Hansa, so the Hansa's still here, not some clandestine Illuminati organisation. Sorry, I could feel the way I was going. Like,
I was like, are you telling me we have to stop them? I don't know what's happening. I was like, I'm not trained for this.
Yeah,
you're like, you know history now, Jed.
Yeah.
We must fight to survive.
The Illuminati are on us. Just make clear, the Hansa are not like the Illuminati.
I taught you about the past, and now you have to fight for the future. I just felt like he was going to hand me a sword and be like, let's go. I'm like, oh God, no. Pete, what have I got into? It was just a podcast, Pete. It was just a podcast.
Yeah, and you were never to be seen again.
Jed Salisbury, the destroyer of the Hansa.
Yeah, the time bandit fighting Hansa.
Oh, Jed Salisbury, Time Warrior.
A Time Warrior.
That's a business card and that.
Oh, I think there's something for Netflix.
There you go. So Netflix, if you're listening, me and Pete are open to discussion.
Yeah. Jed Salisbury, Time Warrior, with his sidekick. Who would occasionally go, that's not right, Jed.
Yeah. This isn't historically accurate. And I'm like, shh, we're on a budget. So, the city is, part of that Hansa group. And that's amazing, because that means that it still links us back to, our brothers and sisters in northern Germany and Scandinavia, and all the way out to Lithuania, Latvia, and Estonia. We're part of that story. It's big stories. That's amazing for people often consider Hull end of road town. Why not? We are the connecting to the world.
Yeah, we are not a cul-de-sac.
Yeah.
We don't live in a cul-de-sac.
No.
And I generally find that people that knock Hull are the people who have never been to Hull and don't understand its history and how it looks out to the sea. And, that's something that I always think we should all just grasp, is the fact that, as a city, we are a maritime city. Let's kind of continue that conversation and that story and be proud of it. And just make sure that people understand that. No, this is not a dead end.
Yeah, and I mean, 1,000 people in 4 hours. Hull understands it.
Yeah.
Clearly, the thirst for the knowledge is the thirst for the to be proud of Hull and its history and its rich tapestry. So I think that's important going forward, is knowing, like, look, we do have this history and there is opportunities to showcase it because people do want to see it.
Yeah, they do want to see it. Yeah. Archaeology happens in York. We know this. I've worked in York, and there is a lot of brilliant archaeology in York. York can take up an awful lot of archaeological oxygen, if that's not mixing metaphors. But outside of that city, with its 2,000 years of continuous occupation, dating back to the 1st century AD, the setting of the Roman fortress there, get out of there and look around and look at, all the other places and towns and cities and villages in Yorkshire, and dare I say it, I'm going to just cross over them and get into Lincolnshire as well. I know that might be contested space, but our brethren in Lincolnshire, that all that archaeology and history over there as well, it all interconnects in many, many ways. We can all delve out into South Yorkshire and further north as well. There's so much out there, and Hull, as a place, continuous history for 700 years, if not more. It's not something to be sniffed at.
No.
I hope it's not sniffed at.
Yeah, history smells.
Yeah, the medieval world would have been a stinky place.
Yeah.
It's we're so used to sanitized shopping and sanitized spaces. But I've seen quite a few medieval cesspits dug in my life, and I won't go into detail.
Medieval cesspit is the name of a punk band.
Ooh, yeah, I think they'd be quite. Depending on what you eat, I was going to say hardcore, but they could be softcore. But yeah, medieval cesspits in waterlogged conditions where you're digging up. I'm not going to go into details. People might be having their breakfast listening to this.
I know if you are eating breakfast. Just before that is history.
Yeah. No, once you finish your breakfast, I can claim it.
Yeah.
It's mine. Even if it's only 10 minutes.
I think, you know, these kids listening to that who like them. I'm like, you haven't washed the pots for breakfast. They're like, Mummy, it's history.
It's history.
Yes.
Yeah. That dirty pot is now archaeology.
Yeah.
That chap, he says that's now archaeology.
Yeah.
You can claim it. I don't have to do those dishes and pots anymore.
And if you touch them, you're interfering with history.
And weirdly, when we dig things up, we do get the remains of people's breakfasts or lunch or dinners or roasts or whatever sticking to pots. And you get like this black encrusted stuff that sticks to pots or sticks to sort of cooking vessels and things like that. And you can analyse it and you can work out that what people ate in the past. So you just after you know what it's like after you've done a roast. And you've kind of like got all the black stuff that's encrusted to the inside of your roasting tin, and you think, I'm going to have to take ages to chip this off. And
they didn't have very liquid.
No, they didn't. Or dishwashers, or other things. A lot of it's elmo grease, and sometimes pots get broken, obviously, and they get thrown away. This crud sticking to them, and that's not just crud. That's a few centuries old. This sort of thing happens thousands of years ago, and then we dig them up. And we get excited about this black crud sticking to the inside or the outside of the pots. And we send it off to material scientists and they analyse it for us. And lo and behold, you can say, right, this was used for a stew, this was used for chicken, this was used for like beef.
It is England though, so I mean it is very bland food. No one.
Well, do you know, did you say bland? Like kind of weird things like garlic was a big ingredient, but before the First World War, we'd done a lot of cooking with garlic. But weirdly, garlic then just fell out of fashion.
Really?
Yeah.
Wait, so Henry VIII could have had garlic bread?
Yeah, Henry VIII could have ate garlic bread.
That is, if you take anything away from this podcast.
However, he wouldn't have had access to tomatoes, so pizza, as we know it, wouldn't necessarily be on his table.
Right, okay.
Yeah. There's New World foods, this is the big thing, no tomatoes, no peppers, no chocolate. Right. They're things that he's not really going to have a lot of access to. If they had been discovered, they were trickling over, but they're not sort of an everyday thing.
Yeah.
So if you're thinking, I could do with a nice bit of pizza now. Jen and Peter talking about pizza and garlic bread. I might just go and get myself one of those. You've got to think, Henry could have had garlic bread, but how we think of pizza, sadly we missed out on that kind of pepperoni and meat feast special, or char grilled vegetables. But flatbreads, they were big. They were a big thing back then. Yeah. So kind of like your flat pizza bases, you just have to put other things on it.
Definitely, yeah. I wonder what everything. Let's go through all my favourite foods and see how it takes right. So, Pete, what would you think the future of the history? That sounds like future of the history of Hull is going to be like then. What do you think the next steps are?
Wow, now there's a big question for you.
And it's the last question.
And it's the last question. So you've put me on the spot. One thing we know about Hull is that it always has to fight and deal with water. Right. It sits on a river, it sits on an estuary. The tidal difference is massive. We know that there are big floods in the past. We know that the medieval city deals with floods and all the other floods that happen. And we know across the history of the South Blockhouse that fighting water, fighting nature. I think we're right on the coast. We've got the climate crisis on our doorstep. We've got fears of rising sea levels. What the first thing Hull has to do is deal with the effects of the climate crisis and with water. So living with water, like thinking about risky cities and how we deal with water. There are projects out there, that look at Hull. So there's a risky city project, there's a living with water project, and that's important. So for Hull to be sustainable in the future, to be a climate friendly, environmentally friendly, flood resilient city is majorly important. And actually you can see the architecture of the city, you can see the way that the city will develop and go that way. We need more soft ground to take any flood water, getting rid of a lot of hard paving and things like that. I think, we could see a more greening of the city. Hull's a pretty green city, it's an international tree city, because of the amount of trees it has, but I think that's going to be a big thing in the next 50 years to a century. So living with water, greening the space, dealing with floods and being that resilient city. And then in addition to that is fact that, you know, if we think about the environment, being a resilient city, so being an environmentally friendly, wind-powered, solar-powered, wave-powered city, we're already there. I think Hull is already on that journey. So if you think of, like, say, Siemens and the big wind turbine factory that we've got out there, and the new energy spaces, you know, I think that's the way the city will go.
Or hear me out, we don't, like the lost city of Alexandria, the lost city of Hull. That sounds exciting.
The lost city of Hull. Well, I'm like, you know, as long as that happens after I'm dead.
Yeah. Or at least after breakfast.
Yeah. I don't mind. Because the insurance is going to be a bugger, isn't it? Yeah. Imagine going to your insurance and, well, the city's going to become the lost city of Hull, but I'm still going to live in my terraced house. So, you know, I'm going to have to look at, you know, how my home contents insurance is affected, and like they're going to go, right, so when are you going to be flooded? Oh, we're thinking of being flooded next Tuesday. And the insurance, the premium's just going to be sort of, I mean, and there's a tale to be told there, because you can see across the country that in the past, where towns and villages have, and you can see this certainly at the village level across like historic Britain, where people experience too many floods in a lifetime or across various generations. You know, some people, like a village might put up with a big flood once every 50 years, and that'll be tolerable. Or maybe an extreme flood once a century, that'll be tolerable. But if that tolerance starts to be eroded away, people will just move.
Yeah.
So the last thing we want is a deserted Hull, and a deserted Hull because we haven't dealt with the climate crisis and we haven't made it a flood resilient city. You know, like it would be, you know, you'd be doing stand up. How many people would be turning up? Nobody, because there'd be nobody to listen to.
Give me a cheer if you've developed gills yet. Well, it's been an absolute pleasure talking to you, man. Thank you for being a guest on the podcast.
No, thank you for all this. And by the way, I just want to say that, you know, I hope that you never have to stand there doing a comedy piece to a crowd of zero. May that never come to pass.
Thank you. You've never been to the Edinburgh Festival, that's a big crowd there.
Although that's where I come from.
Yeah. No, thank you very much for talking to me, man. It's been fascinating. If you've enjoyed the Brickin podcast, please check out more episodes, the previous episodes. Also check out the Goodwin and also Pete.
Yeah, check out Humberfield Archaeology website. We have an open community Facebook page. We tweet as well, and you can get in contact with us and find out more about what HFA are doing within the city and across East Yorkshire.
Perfect. Thank you very much. This has been Brickin. I've been Jed Salisbury, joined by Pete, a man whose life is in ruins.
Thanks so much, Jed.
See you later.